This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Law offices of Galligan and Newman in McMinnville, Tennessee, serving the Upper Cumberland's legal needs in all state and federal courts for over 40 years. They may be contacted at 931-473-8405 or at GalliganNewmanLaw.com.
I'm so glad you guys did it. That a story that could expand the boundaries of country music has finally been told.
Wow, this is a real treat to be on the tour bus with the three of you and a whole bunch of other people traveling down the road on the country music bus tour across Tennessee. Ken, Ketch, and Dayton, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on this very, very, very special moment.
Well, you know, when we finish a film, it takes many, many, many years, and then there's a kind of grief as well as exaltation when you finish the film. It's very satisfying to have it done, but then there's a kind of sense that group of people that are working on it, we're not going to be quite the same, and there's a sense of loss, and that's mitigated by what we call the evangelical dimension. That's when we get out on the road and start trying to sing the praises of the stories that we're trying to tell and the way it fits into the bigger picture of who we are, Americans are, and we can't think of a better subject than country music to try to answer the same old question we've always been asking, which is, who are we?
So why country music? Why this?
Well, it's, the films that Ken and I have done have been on uniquely American things. The national parks, Lewis and Clark, Mark Twain, great uniquely American writer. And this is a uniquely American art form. And we treat it as an art form. It speaks, from the heart of people to the hearts of other people. And it is all of America. I think a lot of people have misconceptions about country music. They think it's just one thing, and what we learned in making it is so many things in its own right, and it touches things outside of its boundaries in music and in culture, and it's been a great joy to explore that.
I'm so glad you guys did it. That a story that could expand the boundaries of country music has finally been told, and there was nobody better to do it than you. And I've been in country music for 20 years now, and I think I've been waiting these 20 years for you to come in, so that because it's something really wonderful, but I wanted to trust it with somebody that I trusted so much.
So we've had the privilege for all of our professional lives to exist in a pretty interesting space between the two-letter lowercase plural pronoun us, which has a great deal of warmth to it, us, right? And it's kindred, we and our. And with the capital letters of us, the US. And we exist in that space. So the subjects we take are big and apparently broad, and they reveal to us huge swaths of American history, but also there's a kind of intimacy to the stories, and you begin to realize that stories are unique, but there's also something similar across all the different subjects that we've done. And in the case of country music, you're watching people being able to dream and dream themselves out of extraordinary poverty. They're able to communicate elemental and basic human emotions to everybody else. Real stuff. I mean, people are afraid of real stuff. I mean, a four-letter word is love, and that's a tough thing to talk about. So what you do is you make jokes about it, or as Dayton says, you narrow it into this confine. It's only one thing. It's only one type of people. It's only one accent, whatever it is. When it's much broader than that, and it's touching on elemental themes like being born and dying and falling in love and losing love and and seeking redemption. All of those things are in country music and in most country music songs. Plus, it's really good music and fun.
Right.
It's fun. There's no homework. It's just fun. And what you have, we're in a time where we're so torn at the edges. The tapestry has been torn, and so people just kind of naturally revert to their tribal corners. And here you have right in front of you something that brings you together, right? Something that just tells you, when Hank Williams says, "I'm so lonesome I could cry," everybody understands what that is. When Dolly says she's got a song, happens to be her most popular song, right? Whose chorus is just, "I will always love you, I will always love you, I will always love you." How boring could that be, right?
But how powerful.
But how powerful is it? And so I think that what we charged ourselves with is kind of capturing that energy, and most important, those stories, and interrelating it. So it's not about one place, it's not about one kind of people, it's not about one kind of music, it's about us.
Right.
Both us, lowercase, and the US in a big way.
This is such I just can't tell you what a thrill this is to be on this bus. Kim Burns, I've wanted you to come to Cookeville for over 5 years, longer than that, because I've been there a long time. And Ketch, I love Old Crow Medicine Show. Just bringing back old time fiddle music, which I grew up with.
And I love Putnam County, Tennessee.
Thank you. And Dayton, I just am such a fan of historical documentaries. So here we are, on our way to Cookeville, Putnam County, the Upper Cumberland, people who are rural, people who get bypassed a lot, drive right past, and you're stopping, and you're gonna share the stories of America with people who want to also share their stories.
But let's just remember too that country music is often telling the stories of people whose stories aren't traditionally told, particularly with a flyover mentality that the United States only exists on the coast, and it does not. And I think that the reason why we've spent our entire professional career in documentary filmmaking in public broadcasting is that we are mandated in public broadcasting to be everywhere. And it is our charge to go everywhere and to say to people, we hear you, we know your story. It's a funny thing is that the presumptions about public broadcasting are as erroneous as the presumptions about country music. It's too narrowing. It doesn't exist in some lower 40, right? Some back acreage. It's really the whole thing. And in many instances, particularly in rural parts of the country, public broadcasting is much more central to the lives of people. Maybe the only signal some folks get, but there's not just the prime time schedule, it's continuing education, classrooms of the air, crop reports, weather, homeland security stuff. We're doing it all.
Right.
And that's our mandate. So why wouldn't we go to as many places as we could and say hello to the folks who keep us going?
Thank you for doing it. And you have to tell a story in a really short period of time. These guys get 16 and a half hours to tell the history of country music, but when you write a song, you have to tell a story like that. So tell me about that.
Well, being a songwriter in the country music tradition is really one of the biggest thrills of what I get to do as a performer. To be able to create, like Ken's talking about, these dreams. These are my dreams, but I'm collecting them, and I collect them in my travels. So being in the Upper Cumberland is a place I've traveled many times. Whenever I play on the Opry, I'm always thinking about the plateau, because the plateau is one of the closest wild places to where that signal is being broadcast from, and it's the wild places that make me want to sing, because the wild places, there's just something happening there that I want the rest of the non-wild world to know about.
So how has it been being part of this and being part of this film?
Well, I'd seen so many of Ken's documentaries before, and I had lived in New Hampshire before, and I used I used the Civil War to get into prep school, which I claim to have seen at age 12. It really helped a lot. I remember this admissions dude at one of these schools was like,
You watched the Civil War.
because I was a Virginian. See, I grew up in Virginia, so Ken was I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley, where so many of the battles were fought. So seeing on PBS Ken's retelling of this tale made me feel like this place that I was from, where all of the high schools were named for generals, all the subdivisions were named for battlefields, all of our mascots were part of the war. I felt like the war was inches below the topsoil. And yet nobody was talking about the war. We were just all surrounded by it. But Ken Burns started a national conversation about my backyard. And at age 12, when this came out, when I was in, what was it, like 1989 y'all came out? So I was 12 in 1990. And I just felt like I was brought into the story, and my town was brought into the story. And not only that, when I watched your documentary about the Civil War, the music that you chose for your documentary was the music that I was going to go out and learn to make over the next 5 years of my teenage years. Clawhammer banjo, old-time fiddle, mandolin, string bass, these kinds of sounds. So I just always felt like I kind of knew you, even though I didn't.
That's the nicest thing you could say.
So being a part of this film, Country Music, is making a full circle in my own kind of dream of a big U.S. and a little us too.
You know, we conducted 101 interviews with people, mostly artists, songwriters, producers, people, of the business. What Ketch brings to our film, he's too young for us to tell his life story and his career, because we stopped our storytelling around 1996. But he brings to life, particularly in our first episode, the people whose story we tell in the first episode are people we can't interview. Okay, I mean we did that with Lewis and Clark. We never got to interview them either. But
So
Ketch,
to wait for Lincoln's people to get
right?
back.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But Ketch brings to it this passion that he obviously has, and a knowledge as well. And there are a few people in our film that are like that. Ketch is one, Marty Stewart, I'd say Roseanne Cash, some other people, Ray Benson, Kathy Mattea, people who not only are exquisite performers and artists, but have an interest and are the holders and the keepers of that history within the family of country music. And Ketch owns the first episode, and it would be nothing.
It's interesting that country music, the story we tell, is a kind of continual expanding out. It's a very omnivorous musical form. It wants to borrow from here and borrow from there, put something together, and it wants to go in a new direction. And then when it goes in a new direction, there's not a collective, but there's an important which then requires it to go back and kind of collect where it's been. So it's a music that's always going back and looking. And so what's so great about Ketch and a handful of others of his generation is that in order to go forward, they also understood they had to go back, which makes it improbable that the youngest people in our film are the guides to the oldest episode, the first one. So they can tell us, Ketch can play what he thinks is the essence of the sound that's coming out of Galax, Virginia, that's going to be suddenly in the 1920s recorded as this hill country music or old time stuff at the same time that the blues or race music is being recorded and other ethnic stuff is finding a market in the United States. People are going, well, I wonder if there's a market for this hill country music. He knows what it sounds like. And so when he talks about the Civil War being under just a few inches under the surface of the Shenandoah Valley, he also understands that a few inches under the surface of all of these other places is this musical tradition too, that he feels compelled to catch and bring back to us alive. So it's and plus, we do this in every film. Either we get appropriated by the people that we get to know, or vice versa, but we end up being friends long after the project's over.
Yeah, I can see this is going to be a trio for a long time, right? You guys are together.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack of this series has to just be the most phenomenal soundtrack.
Yeah, isn't it great?
It's
Well,
incredible.
I mean, if you're trying to embrace a century's worth of country music, you can't cover every song and every artist and every moment, right? So it does give you the opportunity of making those very hard choices. Nonetheless, you go for the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we have to distill the history down, and that's what a good country song does. It distills those emotions and those experiences down into 3 minutes, and we distill a century into 16 hours.
So I've seen the press highlight reel, 2 hour, and people are going to weep in every single episode.
Can I just
It's fun, but it is. You will
while we were working on this project, I was also working with another team on Vietnam, which we released, and this is a gut-wrenching story. It's 18 hours. It's really tough, and when you got out of it, you felt a little shell-shocked, you know, and you felt like, wow, what have I just been through? And all the while in Vietnam, I would finish some stuff and then go over and work on country music. It might be hammering the script, might be tightening up an episode, it might whatever it is. But finally, when Vietnam's done, we're really fully into the editing and trying to figure out. And all of a sudden, it was as moving, if not more moving, than anything else we've worked on. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is dealing with these elemental human emotions, and a lot of them are about loss, and a lot of them are about the joy, but we've just found ourselves in tears in the editing room just trying to understand something. And what we like to do is go below the surface of the thing, you know, so that if you understand, for example, why Dolly had to write that song, I Will Always Love You, that then adds a dimension of meaning to it that increases even the power of that. If you understand just the unbelievable poverty that, you know, Roger Miller came out of Oklahoma with, you just begin to then appreciate more. Or Buck Owens, whose songs have an apparent kind of fun and uplift to them, but as Dwight Yoakam communicated, look behind it and you can sort of see the clenched teeth in which, you know, it's like Ella Fitzgerald in jazz. All of her songs had a kind of joy to them, as opposed to Billie Holiday, but doesn't mean that she hadn't experienced all the things that Billie Holiday had. And then some people like Buck Owens or Miller were translating it into fun and novelty things. But boy, right below the surface was something else. We were interested in collecting and respecting that below the surface thing that I don't think people spend enough time doing. You could turn out country music in a couple of years, but we needed several years to do it.
So your Tennessee tour, you're going to go to Cookeville and Knoxville and Bristol and Memphis, and you're going to end up at the Ryman. What is that like?
Well, I think what we're doing is we're acknowledging, first of all, with this most important of trips, the centrality of the Tennessee story to everything. It's the recording of the Carter family and Jimmy Rogers in Bristol. It's what's happening all across the state. Of course, what happens in the early days of Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley in Memphis at Sun Records. And of course, to end up at the mother church of country music, the Ryman. I mean, Dayton and I had an opportunity to actually talk there. It was, you know, for zero talent. We got there years and years ago to tell people that we were going to work on this thing, and it was like an and then get out of the way while other people played. But we're coming back, and we're sort of like, you know, we get to play the Ryman. You know, it's pretty exciting, and our film is obviously centered around Nashville. But what it also does is says it's not only Nashville, it's not only Tennessee. It's Appalachia, it's Kentucky, it's, you know, it's Texas and Oklahoma, it's the Central Valley of California. It's everywhere. It's Chicago, you know.
Maritime provinces of
it's
Canada.
The maritime provinces of Canada.
It's South Florida.
it's a great story. And so what's nice is that it's a story of music and music changing. It's a story of people and people changing. It's a story of songwriting and the relationship of words, poetry to music. I mean, very powerful forces, a kind of fusion that can create some pretty amazing explosions within your heart. It's about cities, Bakersfield, Nashville, you name it, all these places. And then it's about us. I mean, that's basically what it is at the end of the day. And so this is us.
I just love this opportunity, and we're going to run out of time here in a few minutes. But I know that that you had to have favorite pieces within this series. Like, I'm going to start with you. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite interview? Do you have a favorite moment?
I have 2 children, and I don't have a favorite child. But I'll tell you, one of the highlights for me was getting the great opportunity to interview Merle Haggard, maybe a year or less before he passed on. And I'm a big Merle Haggard fan. I think Mama's Hungry Eyes is probably one of the great songs. And he was rightfully dubbed the poet of the common man. But he also was more interested in talking about the people who came before him than he was about himself. He wanted to make sure that we knew more about Jimmy Rogers. He loved the Maddox Brothers and Rose, and told me very early on, "Are you doing Maddox Brothers and Rose?" I said, "We are now, sir." And Bob Wills, and just what the act of songwriting was. He said they're like dreams, and good songwriters can go up there and catch them, And I think that was a highlight for me. I think that poetry is the highest expression of the written word. The essence takes you to a transcendent level that a poor writer like me can never achieve. And music is the art of the invisible. And if you combine those 2 things, really good poetry and really good music, then you really take it to a level that neither of them individually can probably get there. And in my mind, Merle Haggard reached those heights.
Ketch, did you have a favorite piece?
Yes, there's one of the things that's been great about this project from my place in it, just being one of the voices, is that Ken and Dayton invited me up to Walpole, New Hampshire, where this film was made and edited, and to get to see the whole thing and make comments about it over several days. So in an environment of studious attention to the film, and it was really exciting to get to. I never made any kind of critique of the movies before. Film wasn't ever really my thing as a fiddle player. So here's this film that I just felt everything, on the personal sense, it was like, it's your life story. Every chapter, every episode, every town, all the stories I could see my own life in, and then I see my audience and my job, and also being able to learn about all of these different. I learned so much from this movie, and I thought I knew a lot about country music. But my favorite part, the editing is so fantastic, and so much of the story gets told in the manner in which it's told. So the story is one thing, but the way that the pieces move together, and the photography and the music and the synergy between words and sound and imagery is so powerful. And one of the ways that it really works in episode 1, which I'm really a big presence in, is when there's a passing of what's considered the first commercial country recording, which was made by Fiddlin' John Carson in Atlanta, Georgia, in the early 1920s, mid-20s. And so they're playing the little old log cabin in the lane on the record, and it sounds like this. Right? Well, then this wonderful editor, Eric, switches this from the platter that's spinning to me playing the fiddle, and he modulates so that so there's this lift.
Yeah.
And in the moment you see it's 1924, now it's 19 whenever we made this 2019 now, and country music is still what happened in the 1920s matters today and is a cornerstone of our sound. It's my favorite part.
I love that. I love it. And Ken, we're just in the minute we've got left.
I think I would combine what they've done. I wish I had been able to be there at the Merle Haggard thing, because Dayton's absolutely right. There's something about him that's almost like Zeus, that you're speaking to somebody that we're able to get, who's now no longer with us, so we still have him. I was able to do a handful of interviews that still are so exciting, you know, Dolly or Vince Gill or Marty Stewart. Bill Anderson got choked up a lot. And he got choked up a lot on this idea of a family. And so it's back to us. It's sort of the intimacy. I mean, there are some great solo things, but mostly this involves collaboration. So I think I would synthesize both what Ketch said and what Dayton said, which is this is the story of us sort of putting together these complicated things, and it requires the talents of editors and sound editors and writers, and Dayton's script is so beautiful, and the tough choices that you have to make, and being able to hear what Bill Anderson said or what Ketch said or Rhiannon Giddens. There's many moments throughout the film, and there's blocks of what we've edited together where you got Loretta Lynn and you got Charlie Pride and Merle Haggard, or you have Buck Owens and Dwight Yoakam doing Streets of Bakersfield that goes into Vince Gill doing Go Rest High, and then to Kathy Mattea talking about her husband John Vesner's Where Have You Been, that are highways that are drenched in tears. A lot of flooding going on in these stories, and there are these wonderful moments where you're able to suddenly see a bigger picture by realizing that we're all in this together, whether we're talking about filmmakers or we're talking about the artists, or we're talking about the history, or we're talking about us.
It is us.
It is us.
Thank you.
And
We're out of time.
You're riding the Us Bus.
The Us
Well,
Bus.
we are riding the Us Bus. And thanks for letting me.
Hey, it's the Us Bus.
It's the Us Bus.
It's the Us Bus.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So
Thank you.
much.
Law offices of Galligan and Newman in McMinnville, Tennessee, serving the Upper Cumberland's legal needs in all state and federal courts for over 40 years. They may be contacted at 931-473-8405 or at GalliganNewmanLaw.com.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.